It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays. And this Wellness Wednesday, we're going to continue talking about invalidation. This time about self-invalidation. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff on invalidation in the coming weeks because the thing I did on Manly Monday last week got a big pop. And I do think some of this man versus bear stuff is rooted in invalidation as well. It's apparently a less understood concept than I thought, and that's good. Why is that good? Well, because if we find an area of, we'll say, education where, stuff's lacking, that's a really easy fix, right? If people know it and are still doing it, that's one thing. But if people aren't familiar with the concept, if people don't understand why a particular dynamic works the way they do, we can do something about that and get good results fairly easily. And those are the points I like to focus on because I can do something about that, right? If you'd like to help me do something about this, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Invites to the Discord where you can help shape the content of this channel are going out this Friday. So now's a really good time to become a patron and kick a few bucks to coffee and all that stuff. And working through self-invalidation, it's tough, right? Because the roots of the self-invalidation come externally. A parent, a lot of the times, a teacher, your peers in school, a really abusive boss, a horribly toxic workplace, something like that. Something gave you the message that you're not allowed to have emotions or your emotions are wrong. Now, we're going to go kind of deep dialectic behavior therapy here, DBT. And I know everybody's not big on DBT. I get why. DBT worked for me, but I adapt it because I didn't love everything about it. But that's one way that the therapeutic system invalidates people. And this is why, as I say on my podcast every week, I am not a therapist. I'm a peer counselor because I do find that there is something inherently invalidating in the existing mental health system, in that it's all about tools and the system. And people will go to therapy and they'll say, look, something here is not working for me. And they'll just be, you have to work the steps. You have to use the tools. You're not using the tools. Like, no, the metaphor I use is if you hand somebody a hammer and they don't know how to use it, yeah, they might fluke it out and drive in the nail the first time. But I remember when I was learning how to use a hammer as a kid, back when they didn't bubble wrap kids the way they did now. But you have to learn how to start tap, tap, tap. You don't just start going wham, 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 because you're likely to hit your finger or your thumb or something like that, right? And that's what happens to so many people with mental health tools. They're not explained why, and not everybody cares about why they work. Some people will just try it. The people I work with need to understand the processes behind what I'm making them do, because otherwise it's just another person forcing them to do something. And because I work with a lot of autistic people, we get into that demand avoidance territory. And I do think that the demand avoidance in people with, in autistic people, the people with autism is such a tick from dealing with parents. Like, it's, right? But I do think that the demand avoidance is rooted somewhat in invalidation autistic people underwent as children. We don't listen to any kids enough. We certainly don't listen to autistic kids enough because all the therapy, and it's important to be able to navigate the world. As somebody who has to code switch a lot to navigate the world, it's useful to be able to do it. But we do have to acknowledge that it is code switching, or it doesn't become useful to people. It becomes something people are constantly, stupid, stupid, stupid with. And it's not just autistic people. If you were raised in an environment that, I hate using, invalidated your emotions, meaning criticized you for having feelings, shamed you for having feelings. It wasn't about your behavior. It was, you're selfish, you're too sensitive, suck it up, grow a pair, learn to handle life, any of those things, right? If you were shamed by your for having feelings, if it wasn't focused on your behavior, like if it wasn't something like, all right, I absolutely understand that you're angry and I get why. We have to find a solution to this that isn't blowing up on people, right? That's a very different message than you have no reason to be upset. What's wrong with you, right? Or you just can't do that. And so often I hear it from people at work. I hear it from people in their relationships. The one I hear a lot of, and this is a very tough one, is in romantic relationships, people came from two different upbringings. And at first, one person loves how affectionate and warm and caring and validating the partner is. And then they get closer, and then they move in together. And then there's eventually that time where upbringing hits, and then they start being wonderfully warm and caring, and then they become, you're too sensitive, this is just the way my family talks to each other. And that can be soul destroying for the person who originally was treated as the exact same trait, went from being a really good thing to a shitty thing overnight. It can really knock somebody for a loop, especially because sensitive people do get the shit kicked out of them by the world. I was a sensitive kid, and I spent years and years and years toughening up because people told me to. And that worked in some ways. People stopped telling me I was too sensitive. I started getting told I was scary, or, you're making people uncomfortable. Nobody wants to work with you. You don't have enough compassion. So I was like, well, fuck, this is what y'all told me to do, and now you don't like it? Well, not that way. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. And this is why I love sensitive people. Reverse that. Intelligent people tend to be sensitive, because intelligent people are taking in more information. The problem they discovered with kids in the gifted program like me is that because they didn't want us to get bored, they were exposing us to material above our level of emotional development. And that caused us to, one, overload our brains, two, start behaving like little adults, because adults were nicer to us than our peers were. And then it became this feedback loop of, we preferred the company of adults, so we had more adult mannerisms, and so we were treated as weird by our peers and picked on even more because we had adult mannerisms. And that's a really reductive way of putting it, but we only got so much time, right? And especially if a child was parentified. Definitely if they came from an abusive home, like I did, and relied on other adults to fill the gaps from knowing that home was profoundly fucked up, right? You really got attached to non-parental adults that gave a shit. And, you know, if I could have, I would have, you know, only spent time around, you know, teachers and youth workers and stuff like that. It's good that I also associated with kids my own age. Well, they weren't my own age. They were a year older than me, which added another level of problem because I skipped grade 2. I went from grade 1 to grade 3 because of academics. And when you're that age, you know, the difference between 7 and 8, that's a big year. The difference between, you know, 12 and 13 is a big year. The difference between 15 and 16 and 18 and 19, because 19 is the legal drinking age in this province, those are really big deals. Thank God my birthday is in February, so at least it's the beginning of the year, right? But these moments were very alienating. And instead of being able to talk about it, I was lectured about how lucky I was to be so smart and so advanced. And they stopped doing things like what they did with me because they found out that it was psychologically terrible. And they, you know, every once in a while, you'll see the stories in the paper about somebody going to college at 13. And I always get scared for that kid because it could work if they've got friend groups outside of college. But what's that friend group going to talk about with somebody who's in second year university when other people their own age are in grade 10, right? It is a problem, and it's difficult without individualized plans. We do independent learning plans for students who are behind, but we don't do independent learning plans for students who are ahead. And pretty much every kid needs an independent learning plan of some reason, of some way. And even I do find the ILPs or the IEPs, independent education plans, are a form of invalidation for some of these kids. I've talked to people who were on them and they're like, yeah, they gave me this because I was dumb. And it's like, that wasn't what that was designed to do. They're designed to allow kids to learn differently, not learn at all. And if those things are making people self-identify as dumb, yikes. And so we all have something in our backgrounds that is invalidating because life's not perfect, right? Shit happens. But if you had examples of validation, if you had people doing it right, you can go, okay, those people did it right. They were helpful to me. They called me on my shit when needed, but it was always about the behaviors, not my feelings, versus people who had no one or precious few people. Or if the invalidation so drowned out the validations, that's a very different issue. And when you are perpetuating those patterns internally, when you are self-invalidating, your emotions get really big really fast because, trust me, it feels a lot better to go, I'm a little freaked out right now, but that's okay. versus I'm a little freaked out. What's wrong with me? I'm such a coward. Toughen up. Just saying those words. Oh my God, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling more anxious. I had an experience over the weekend on the Discord that was absolutely, utterly humiliating. It felt like shit. And I started to beat myself up. You shouldn't have said anything. What's wrong with you? And then I'm like, you know what? No. Everybody I talked to backed me. And because it's been a rough go of things lately with a bunch of shit and I can't quite get a handle on the underlying issues, the old habits of self-invalidation, just the problem is you, toughen up, why'd you open your mouth, they got really loud and I wasn't listening to the people around me. And so I started listening to the people who were going, yeah, that guy was an asshole. And to be clear, it wasn't what he said. Well, it kind of was. But it was what I had to say to make the point. And then, I had to watch. And I understand the tactics of the people who did it. But I had to watch the guy who was the proximate cause of my humiliation get sympathy. Because people were trying to reason with him, and I completely understand why they did it. But he did get what he was looking for, which is, no, it's okay. It's other people. The problem's not you, which is not what the person was actually saying, but it was clearly what the guy heard. But again, if I beat myself up for being humiliated, that makes the humiliation worse instead of better. If I just go, yeah, that was a fucking humiliating experience and we're still here. It's in the past. I got a lot of people supporting me. I had the right to say something because I was telling the truth. And I had the right to feel that, even though I did get support. I still have the right to feel my feelings. I still have the right to be pissed off. I still have the right to be humiliated. I still have the right to go, I was freaked out because I gave somebody a chance who, it was a coin flip whether this person deserved a chance or not. And I erred on the side of give the guy the chance, and it was the wrong call. And I can acknowledge that without telling myself I'm stupid, right? Because we have to do all these things with incomplete information. And I am going to be more selective about the behaviors I tolerate going forward. But I was able to come to that decision because I stopped the urge to self-invalidate, because I recognized that the self-invalidation is an internal ritual based on years of external training. The shitty thing about abuse is that long after the abuser's gone, the ways they taught you to abuse yourself persist. And you have to be constantly vigilant against them. And you spend your entire life learning the different ways the abuse affected you and correcting for those things. But corrections do not mean you did something wrong. Corrections mean you deserve better and you deserve to be happier. And that's a very different story you tell yourself. That's a very different schema for navigating this. That construct you recognize is very different when you say, all these feelings are here for a reason. And other people may not understand them. I may not even understand them. But And I didn't understand why it was so humiliating at first. I eventually realized that it was just an echo of all the other times that I'd come forward about something and was told, well, you have no proof. And of course, the minute the guy said, well, I'm going to have to check my old messages, I started panicking. And I actually did do a search. And I found some proof. It wasn't, it wasn't all of it, because the guy jumped around from different social media services, but it was something to corroborate what I was saying. But people didn't ask. People believe me because they know at this point I don't talk shit. And apparently there were other things, other behaviors people were seeing that caused them to question the guy. So I got ahead of myself thinking, oh my God, it's happening again. It was a trigger. It was a trauma response. Unfortunately, this time I caught myself in the cycle of invalidation of nobody's going to believe you. You're fucked now. Like, look what you've done. You've screwed everything up. I caught that. And what that meant is that I was able to really listen to what other people around me were telling me. And I was able to stay present and not get caught up in what happened in the past. And one of my missions for the Discord is for people to see me going through this work, and people see me struggling with this stuff in a way that they can't see a therapist going through it, because therapeutic distance, right? That's why I'm not a therapist. But set the example of, have the doubts and work through them. Have the negative feelings and deal with them, process them. I really do believe that telling people to do a particular thing is useless if you don't model the behavior yourself. You just seem like a hypocrite. Instead, I think the most powerful thing we can do is live the way we want other people to live, behave the way we want other people to behave, whether or not they do it first. I behave the way I behave for me, no one else. And that means I can deal with people talking shit about me, because I am not self-invalidating. Stopping the self-invalidation, learning how to internally self-validate, is not foolproof. It does make it much easier to handle criticism. If you're self-invalidating, everything is going to hurt more. There's sort of two states in DBT. One is extreme emotional vulnerability, where everything just burns like 1,000 suns. And I'm like, wait, that's the opposite of what I'm doing, which is self-invalidation, because it sure feels like it's burning like 1,000 suns. But I realize that I'm adding gasoline on the fire, right? If I stop adding gasoline on the fire, if I stop telling myself I'm fucking up for having feelings, of course it's not going to feel as bad. And this probably sounds like a very foreign concept to you right now. It did to me. But I do want to start groups. I do one-on-one stuff, and the groups are proving challenging because setting the structure for them is a lot. But that's sort of what the Discord is a starting point of okay, we have certain things that we encourage and we don't encourage in these groups. And blaming yourself for the shit that went wrong in the past is one of the things we discourage. Because the truth is that if it was your fault, if it was not your fault, nothing changes about what you have to do now. You can't go back and change the past. You can only correct going forward. And that sounds like, well, how do I correct properly if I'm blaming if I don't blame myself because I'm not taking responsibility? Well, I trusted the wrong person in this case. I can either say I was stupid and an idiot and, stupid, or I can say he got a chance that most people I talk to say they want. And that was the whole point of the conflict. Like, dude, it was over that stupid man and bear thing. It's like, dude, if I was Team Bear, I never would have given you a chance. And he proceeded to show that I never should have given him a chance because he acted like a complete asshole. But the point was still valid, right? I did nothing wrong by giving him a chance. He screwed up by acting unworthy of it when it mattered. And so I stopped giving him the chance. And this makes breakups easier. If somebody's stuck on a breakup, there's something about it where they're blaming themselves. They're still putting the person they loved up on a pedestal and thinking there's something wrong with them, that the relationship didn't work. And it isn't, right? We all have things about us that people will reject. That doesn't mean they're bad, right? I can't help having trauma. I can't help having an autoimmune disease. I can't help having a chronic eye condition, which means the vision in my left eye constantly jumps. It's the weirdest fucking thing. Got new sunglasses. Now I just got to get glasses. But I can't help any of these things. And if somebody drops me because I'm too much work, or they complain that I'm not moving fast enough because of any of these things, it's disappointing. It hurts. But it's not me. It's not a moral failing. Okay, that door closed. What doors are still open? So if you want to think about self-invalidation with a metaphor, because that helps some people. Instead of banging your head against the door that's closed, that no amount of banging will ever make open again, look around. See what other doors are still open to you. Pick one and go through it. Because making choices is powerful. And what that does is stops you continuing to perseverate. Or one client mentioned the computing issue of recursion. And there's a philosophical version of that as well, but I'm fixated on figuring out how to apply it to mental health standard, because I find that computer code works for a lot of people, but this idea that, this thing happened and I'm looping all the way back. It's like Cable in the X-Men, he's Scott Summers' son, but he met Scott Summers in the past before he was born. Like, that's what people's brains do when you beat yourself up and keep trying to change the past through self-blame. That door's closed. It's gone for whatever reason. You have a choice to keep throwing yourself against that closed door or walking through an open one. And walking through the open door is a heck of a lot easier when you believe that you deserve to. And self-invalidation chips away at your sense of worth. It's not productive in the slightest. If you like this content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Discord links coming out soon. Thanks for watching and be well.